it was funny because when I first showed up here to Oregon 2 years ago, I was in a 20-foot travel trailer. That's all the stuff I owned, which is what I wanted. But that in 2 years, I bought a house right next to the country club, joined the country club, just bought a 1,300-acre ranch. It's not about the stuff. It's about, I've committed and worked hard and, providing for my family now. But I think if you it's important to have those goals, but if you spend your whole life thinking that your life is going to be better when you have those things, you miss out on enjoying the present. And the things that you just talked about is, you spend your time in the gap and not in the present, and enjoy the success you have made. I mean, right now I get to sit on my back porch looking at the mountains, talking to my boy, a great friend of mine who's got to start a podcast. And, for me, it's like, it's a great day. I want to enjoy it. I don't need to worry about, if once we get to 40 million in revenue, how much better my life's going to be. Cause it may not be better. Hell, it may be dead by then. So, it's really just enjoying your present and, win the day, man.
All right, Zach, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Will, man. I appreciate you having me. I haven't been saying I've been waiting to get an invite to be on the show, but I've been hoping that at some point, you ask me, and obviously love to support you in your venture, and feel honored to be a guest.
Yeah. Well, you're a stud, and we have a pretty cool story of how we met. So I'm excited to get into that. But to start, tell the world about DRI Inc., construction company. Really, you guys are globally based with co-founders in different countries, but you're focused with work in the United States. Talk about how this whole thing started. What is DRI Inc. and where you guys are at today?
Yeah, we actually started as Digital Roofing Innovations, and the whole concept about how we started. I had a corporate job. I was doing sales, selling digital marketing packages, and I'd post online because I just read the 4-Hour Work Week that I wanted to start traveling, and traveling outside the United States primarily. And I had a friend of a friend that had responded and said, "Hey," because he saw I was going to Mexico and Colombia, Colombia and Costa Rica at the time, and he said, send me a private message. And he had just spent a year doing a sabbatical and traveling. And so he had reached out and said, "Oh, you need to stay in Colombia longer. Like, Colombia blows away Costa Rica." Anybody that loves Costa Rica, I'm sorry, but that's just what he had told me. And so anyway, that's how the first message between my now business partner, Chris McGuire, and I started, because he had, kind of went down this path as well. And I told him this crazy idea I had. And at the time, we were actually going to start a company where we were going to generate leads and then resell them to contractors. And then that turned into us starting a roofing company. And him and I do nothing about roofing. We just figured if we could make the sale, we could find subcontractors to do the work, and ended up getting my license. And a few years later, we decided we were going to start doing federal government contracting, which is what we do now, and shorten the name from Digital Roofing Innovations to DRI. And it ended up being a great pivot. I mean, it's, kind of funny how business goes in full circle sometimes, that you have this one idea and then you end up in this totally different lane that you had intended to go down. But, really at the end of the day, it's, we do work in the United States, but we've kind of built a company that has the ability to operate without us being there physically, which has been a challenge being in construction. And it's a kind of a foreign concept for a lot of people, but we really were really big on, incorporating principles from the 4-Hour Work Week and Rich Dad Poor Dad. So low overhead, maximizing investments and building assets, and, being able to manage it remotely.
Awesome. And so you are a former military guy. And so how did your experience in the military set you up to succeed in business?
Man, it's one of the things now that we're kind of because before it was just, really the discipline, the getting up early, staying up late. I felt like, in the military, you have to sacrifice a lot, and you work very odd hours, and a lot of times you go a lot of sleep deprivation in order to achieve if you want to be a high performer in the military. I mean, being smart and being disciplined helps, but a lot of times if you just are willing to work your ass off more than other people, that's how you get ahead. Like most things in life, but in the military, some of the sacrifices you're willing to make that other people won't, can really propel you because of what an odd job it is compared to the corporate world. But now that we're kind of past that and we now have employees and stuff, one of the things I feel like being in the military has really helped me with is team building and communication. That's something I feel like we're excellent at in the military is, building out teams and units and getting people to work together and, squashing egos. Because really in the military, it's about selfless service, or at least it's what it should be for most of us. And I think that's one huge advantage that some of us have as we get into our further along in our corporate careers and our civilian jobs is that selfless service, and understand that your job really is about taking care of the lowest man on the totem pole just as much as it is about taking care of yourself. And I feel like that's given me, a lot of humility. I'm a big reader, so as we've improved, as our company's improved, I've been wanting to, I strive every day to make the company about my employees and the service we provide, not how great Zach Blenkinsopp is. Because that's not really, at the end of the day, it's not really relevant. Like you can be a rock star and you can be great at what you do, but if nobody wants to follow you, you're never going to build a successful company.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, people first organizations where culture is important, where employees are number one in the eyes of management, those companies are going to thrive long term because they're going to be able to retain people better. They're going to be able to get more out of their people because people actually enjoy coming to work and they actually feel valued. And
Mm-hmm.
I know you're a big reader, and I'm obsessed with the book Extreme Ownership by Jocko
Yep.
Willink, the great Navy SEAL commander. And
Yep.
you talked about humility, and a quote from Extreme Ownership, Jocko talks about how implementing extreme ownership requires checking your ego and operating with a high degree of humility, admitting mistakes, taking ownership, and developing a plan to overcome challenges that are integral to any team success.
Mm-hmm.
And humility is the big piece because
Yep.
many times in business, there's finger pointing going on when there's an issue or there's a mistake. But when you adopt the principles of extreme ownership and the whole team adopts that concept, there's no more finger pointing. It's no, this is my mistake. This is on me. And as leaders, if we can develop those qualities, then that trickles down throughout the organization, which helps you to provide a better service. Again, helps to keep your team all on the same page, and it allows you to improve that team health where people feel like this is a team effort. We're working towards the same goal. It's not this person's fault or this person's fault. We're working together to achieve this common goal. So obsessed with the book and concept of extreme ownership.
Man, I'll tell you, I can't tell you how many meetings I sat in on and stuff where that principle that you're talking about in the book, where one of my guys maybe did something wrong, and I get on as the owner and I say, hey, it's my fault. This happened. And I take all the blame. I always tell people I will take an, unsurmountable amount of blame, because for me, it really doesn't matter because at the end of the day, it's my company and it is my fault. If one of my employees makes a mistake, I'm the one who hired them, or I'm the one who put them in that position to make the mistake, or I didn't check something that I maybe should have checked. Now I give my guys a lot of rope. They, especially like my project managers, I tell them all the time, they're an extension of ownership because we give them so much responsibility. And sometimes, it's a shock for them at first because we do give them so much responsibility, but part of that is that I want them to screw up. And at the end of the day, I will go on and take that blame. And I've had so many meetings afterwards where they've hit me up. They're like, hey man, like, that's not your fault. That's on me. Versus if I'd have been like, hey man, you screwed that up. And they may have gotten defensive and been like, hey, it's not my fault. This is what happened, whatever. But as the leader, when you say, "Hey, I made a mistake," and you have that humility, I feel like it's a massive help that I've had throughout my career. And that's a book that I've read probably 2 or 3 times. I love extreme ownership. I love what Jocko teaches, and so many. I think one of the hardest things for employees, man, is when you have a boss who thinks they're always right and they can't ever take any blame, or blames you for everything. That's a crappy position to be in. I think we've all probably had a boss like that at some point in our life, and it's not very fun. And you bring up a book. There's another really, even though it really just applies to Fortune 500 companies, but I think any small business can take tons of principles from this book. It's called Good to Great, and he talks about one of the chapters. He talks about a level 4 leader. So that level 5 you're talking about, and again, I'm not talking bad about some of these guys. Some of them are like massively famous and done great things. But you take like an Elon Musk or Jeff Bezos. There's very polarizing figures and stuff for their companies. But most Fortune 500 companies actually have not had success from having the big, ego CEOs come in. A lot of it's been that, that older guy or gal who wears the pleated khakis or the boring, business pants, and they look like somebody that would be on a farm more than they would be the CEO of a company. They look like just a regular guy. They're not a big fancy personality and making it all about them. And they call it, I think he calls it I can't remember the name of what he actually calls the person but it's typically, again, the most plain looking guy or gal who takes over a company, and they just come in and they do work, and they're quiet, and they just exemplify what it really should be to be a leader.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in again, the words of Jocko, he talks about how there's no bad leaders, or sorry, there's no bad teams, there's only bad leaders.
100%.
And then you go to the quote by Alexander the Great that says, "I'm not afraid of an army of lions led by a sheep. I'm afraid of an army of sheep led by a lion."
Yeah, 100%.
Right? It starts at the top. And if you don't have those leaders who adopt that extreme ownership, who take responsibility for the entire team, then things can get messy really, really quickly. And, in regards to your military experience, I was never in the military, but me playing sports all my life and then playing college and professional football, the value in being a part of a team early on in life, I think, is so valuable when you get into the business world and you get into your professional career, like knowing what it takes to be a part of a team, to all work towards a common goal, to have to adapt to all these different personalities, to be open-minded, and to come together and grind on a day-to-day basis. That's powerful. And that there's a reason why these massive employers and Fortune 500 companies are recruiting former military, are recruiting former athletes, because to have that experience of being a part of a team and working towards that common goal, practicing humility, putting the team first, that's so valuable in regards to the professional world.
Yeah. Well, man, and you talk about the, like, you think about the, leaders, same things about a coach. Like if you play for a coach and it's all about him, if he gets on the stadium and he's like, I coached this team so good, and I hire the best coordinators. You're like, dude, I was the guy, catching the touchdowns. Jimmy was over there, the one throwing it. Tyrese was the one that picked up that fumble and ran it back for a touchdown. Like, the players won the game, and the coaches that understand that are the successful ones. Like, you take, guys like Nick Saban. I mean, it's never about him. It was about his players. And he always, even though I'm an Auburn fan, I still have a massive amount of respect for Nick Saban. And anytime you hear him in an interview, he always talks about his players. Talks about his players.
Absolutely. Yeah, Nick Saban is a legend, and there's a reason why he's got X amount of national championships, right? And he kind of had a no bullshit attitude. Either you adopt the Alabama ways or you're out.
Yep.
Either you put this team first or you're out. Yep. And it's so interesting that he left and retired from college football the time that he did, in a time when NIL and this transfer portal is becoming huge. And from my standpoint, looking in on the situation, it seems like, yes, maybe it was time for him to go, but coaches in college aren't able to coach their players the same way anymore. They're not able to ride them. They're not able to push them like they once were able to, out of fear that they're going to pack up and leave the
Yeah.
following year. So it's a
Yeah.
completely different landscape now.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I think it's going to be tough. I mean, we'll see how, everything kind of shakes out. But it's definitely much more like, like G League now and in college football than when it used to be and stuff. And I think that really sucks for a lot of those young guys because, granted, I know just like basketball, like they can do 1 year and go pro. Baseball, they don't have to go to college. But I feel like that was one thing that gave football a big advantage is, guys at least stayed in college for 3 years and they stayed on a team and, very rarely did you have the transferring and stuff. You and I could spend a whole podcast just talking about that, but yeah, we'll see it. We'll see how it all shakes out, man. I do agree though. It's going to be tough for the coaches kind of going forward.
Right. Well, and even along the same line with this NIL and transfer portal stuff in college football, I mean, the same is really happening in the professional world in regards to, it used to be decades ago how the power was in the employer's hands. I have a job. I get to dictate the terms. You need a job. You need money. Come work for me. Whereas now in today's age, employees are a lot less loyal to companies than they were before. And they're many times a lot more likely to leave for a couple thousand extra bucks, despite maybe having.
Why do you think that is? Like, what's your take on like why that's like that in the corporate world now more than ever?
I think it's just access. I think social media is a huge deal. LinkedIn, you're constantly getting bombarded with ads. And I think it's also this baby boomer generation. They were willing to work 40, 50, 60 hours a week, work a couple more extra hours to make a couple extra bucks. This generation is not willing to do that. They want the flexibility and the freedom of life. And so it's a multitude of things that are contributing to it, but yeah, I think it's access online just to endless opportunities. And then just the desire for this younger population for freedom over a couple extra bucks.
Yeah, I was interested in like your response on that because you obviously with what you've done in your professional career, you being access to all the college football players with podium and stuff and high school players, like you have a lot more access to like that generation. I mean, I play golf with some younger guys and I always ask them questions and stuff like that, particularly ones that are getting into the workforce. Cause I'm interested, I want to, even though I'm 40 now, but I still want to, see the kind of the battle rhythm of these younger people. So I'm really interested in your, cause I don't know, for me, I'm starting to get on the, get off my lawn stage in my life. And, I don't want to, but that's just, I'm 40 now. And, yeah, I was just interested in what you have to say about that. Cause it's, I do see it a lot.
What's your opinion on it?
Part of it, I think, and this is, again, part of my generation, I feel like a lot of it's parenting. And it's now there's so much more sense of entitlement. I feel like for the most part, like, you don't want to get me started on labor unions, but like they accomplished what they tried to, 50 plus years ago, which was getting, basic rights for employees. I mean, and don't get me wrong, I work really, really hard on retaining employees, and I feel like we've done a fantastic job of that, but it's hard finding good young people. I've interviewed them. And don't get me wrong, I've interviewed some fantastic young employees and stuff, but it always kind of felt like they were asking questions in the interview like, what's my next move after this? And I'm like, I want to know what's your next move now. Like, if I'm going to hire you, like that's, I'm going to treat you well. I'm going to train you. But, if we do that, I would like to be able to have an opportunity to keep you long-term, not, you looking for your next opportunity. So I feel like maybe a lot of it, I think it's a lot of parenting issues. And again, it's my generation who did it. I feel like a lot of parents didn't instill discipline. I just had recently had a baby, and I've made it very clear,
Yes.
like when she gets of age, she's going to have chores. She's going to, do a lot of things I didn't necessarily have the opportunity to do. But like I want her to, learn an instrument, maybe even if she doesn't like it. She will be bilingual. Um, I feel like, instilling discipline in your children. And again, this is, there's plenty of young people I interview that are great and disciplined. They work hard, and but do feel like a lot of that starts from parenting, and particularly in the U.S. I don't know what happened, but I feel like that's more and more and more. You have children who just grow up and they have no responsibility, and then all of a sudden they get to workforce, and when they have a boss that is demanding because they're trying to get their best out of their employees, they're just like, no, that's too much for me. I'm going to look somewhere else. And I feel like that's part of the issue is that you're not teaching children to be responsible and to build confidence and be able to be resilient. Like I don't like if same way with you, man. Like if there's something you don't like, instead of you being like, I'm not going to deal with that. You're someone who'll say, no, I need to work hard to not let that get to me, to not bother me, to build resiliency. And I feel like we just had a complete, opposite happen in the U.S. where people just try to protect their kids from anything bad that's happening, which I'm saying you protect your children, but you also build them to be resilient to difficult situations. And if you don't build that, they're gonna quit every time things get hard. And I feel like that starts with the parents.
Right, right. And as organizations, they're going to have to start to be proactive in how they
Mm-hmm.
treat employees and treat their staff moving forward to create this culture that encourages people to stay and to want to be bought into the team. And how do they do that? Well, a couple of things. One is you got to have every one of your team members a part of the right meeting pulse. At EOS, we constantly talk about having circles connected, where there's
Mm-hmm.
3 different scenarios. One of which you have these circles and they're never touching, and so you're not in contact with your people enough. What happens? They feel disconnected from the team and they leave. The other one
Yep.
is where the circles are completely overlapping to that micromanager, and
Yeah.
what happens? They feel micromanaged and they leave. Whereas
Yep.
if you have the perfect meeting pulse, we're getting your people together on a weekly basis, touching the most important topics, they're going to feel involved. They're going to feel like they're contributing to the team, and they're going to stay long term.
Mm-hmm.
Secondly, quarterly conversations. You stay in front of potential issues when you meet with your direct reports on a quarterly basis, and you just check in. We encourage it to be offsite, non-formal. How's everything going? What are some resources that you don't have that you need? You give a little bit of feedback. You're doing well here. You can have some improvement here. Are you making enough money? But having those quarterly conversations with your people helps you to stay in front of these big issues that people tend to just sit on and sulk on, which
Yeah.
again makes them leave if they're not being confronted on those things. So
Yep.
organizations are going to have to start to be more and more proactive and making sure that they're communicating with their people, making sure that they're happy.
Yeah, yeah, it makes a lot of sense, and you do see that more now because you have so many companies like us that operate remotely. Of course, I've had the opportunity since I've been in Southern Oregon. We kind of have a small team here, but in person, I see them once every couple of weeks. I'll go out to a job site and stuff because I still want them to understand like we are still a remote company, and I do let them work from home. But I think that's important. What you're talking about is you get that used to. You probably had the circle that you dealt with the micromanagers, and then even the managers, depending on how large organization, now they have all this freedom working from home, and they're like, well, I don't really need to check on my guys. They're fine. They're not
Mm-hmm.
complaining, and that's like you said, that circle starts maybe drifting a little bit, and then people don't feel, um, while they probably enjoy their freedom, they don't feel that's not a long-term way to keep people when they don't feel like they're part of anything.
Exactly. Exactly. And so, Zach, I want to rewind to what you talked about initially in regards to you working in digital marketing and then transitioning to the roofing construction industry. Like, holy shit, that's a massive turn in regards to what you do. But what's so cool about that is, now that I'm an EOS implementer, business coach, working with a lot of different companies in different industries, what I'm finding is that business at the core is the exact same for any industry.
Mm-hmm.
You have the leader of the company, you have operations, building a product or delivering a service, you have a finance department tracking cash flow coming in and out of the organization. Then you have a marketing and sales function that's responsible for going out, creating demand, and then closing business on that demand.
Mm-hmm.
And regardless of the industry, you have those functions. And so how was that transition from marketing to construction? Was it seamless? Was it hard? Talk about that.
Well, and I don't know. I think you and I have had this conversation. I know we've had this conversation, but it's probably a while ago. I actually started my first company when I was in my late 20s, and shortly after I got out of the military in oil and gas. And my buddy and I, we quit our very high paying oil and gas jobs to start a trucking company, and we didn't know anything about trucking either. And at the time, I don't think he was ready to be a business owner yet. I was ready. I felt like I was there, and it wasn't just totally his fault. Like, it wasn't like he was just a bad partner and it didn't work out. We both worked hard, but we just started our business at the wrong time. It was oil and gas oil went from $110 a barrel to like 28 in a 6-month period. And so the bottom just dropped out. Everybody quit drilling. And then so our little company, we were hauling oil field equipment across West Texas and Eastern New Mexico. We just didn't have the capital to withstand the downturn. And man, it was a tough lesson learned, because I put every dime I had into the company, and I sold off every piece of real estate I had and everything I'd invested in as a young guy coming out of the military, and we just didn't make it. But I went all in. I said, I'm going all in. I may only have a 7 and a jack here, but if it doesn't hit the river, it doesn't hit the river, and I lose. And that's what happened. And so I'd gotten that experience losing it all. And then going in a corporate job. And I tried to implement things at my corporate job that I learned as a business owner, because I was selling to small to medium businesses. And I had a great amount of success. I never considered myself a salesman, but I ended up being the number one sales rep in the company in less than a year in my first time in the sales role. Not that I'm great. It's just I felt like I learned a lot as being a business owner. And really, how it is in B2B sales. It's not, if whoever talks the most loses. And I learned a lot just to listen to my clients and listening to the issues they had as business owners. And man, I got so much feedback. So, after about a year and a half, I got passed up on a promotion that I thought like I was the clear favorite to get on because basically I was going to be leading a team of like 20 salespeople to be selling to small to medium businesses. And because I didn't fit the corporate model of how they want to sell, I was more of informal. Let's go to, let's go to these business engagement meetings. Let's, get out on the golf course. Let's, do other ways of meeting clients other than cold calling, because it's, at the time, I think it was 2016 or something like that. Like, how many times do you actually listen to a cold call?
Almost never.
Yeah. And I didn't either as a business owner. I'm like, this model sucks. Like, I know it's worked for you in the past, but like, I felt like there's other ways to engage. But, I got all this feedback from all these small to medium businesses that, particularly a lot of ones in construction, and I had a lot of contractors. And so making the transition then, because it's like you said, I didn't know anything about construction, but I felt like I knew how to run a business, and I was ready to get my heart broken again, and it's kind of like falling in love again. Like, you get your heart ripped out one time. It's like, man, I don't know if I ever want to do that again. And I said, I'm never going to start another business. It's a horrible decision. I'm just going to work a corporate job and have some, move myself up the ladder and move to, LA or New York and get some a-hole kids where it's too much Under Armour and a wife who gets mad that I play too much golf. And that was going to be my life. And I just, I couldn't do it, man. I tried the corporate life, and I just, I'm built to run a small business. It's just, I've got the right mentality, and I've found what I love to do. And like you said, it doesn't really matter the industry. It really matters more of, can you run a small business? Do you have do you have the skill set for that?
Right. And to your point, I think the philosophy of there's no losses in life, only lessons.
Yeah. Yeah.
If we learn from our mistakes, if we continue to put in the work and put in the effort after facing adversity, then what's on the other side of that is everything that we desire. But
Hmm.
all too often, people give up after they face that first adversity, after they fail in their first business, or after they fail after trying that new thing. And in life, we learn so much more from the train wrecks of situations than from the successes.
Yeah.
And so you failing in that first business sets you up to succeed in the corporate job first, and then now getting back into your DRI now. Like if you wouldn't have made those failures 10 plus years ago in that trucking business, you probably wouldn't have found success as quickly in what you're doing now.
Sure. You look at your path. I mean, you being an implementer now, it gives you so much more in a business coach because you've got experience running a small business. I mean, I've had these business coaches hit me up and they're like, oh, I got all this corporate experience. I'm like, yo, dude, have you ever ran a small business? Because it's not like if you're already part of a big organization, running a small business for the 98% of what we do sucks and it's not
Mm,
fun. And you know that you've lived the life, and I feel like
mm,
when you've lived the life, it's almost like somebody that's never been a parent tries to give you parenting advice. That's why I never, try to tell anybody else what they do because I've never been a parent. I've been a dog
mm.
dad, but I've never raised a child. So, while I'm critical about, I feel like, discipline and a lot of things for the other children, like I still got to walk down the path, and if somebody
Mhm.
hasn't, you know, ran a small business and implemented like you have, then it's difficult to give advice on that stuff. And you've walked it, man.
Yeah. I went through the ringer, made a lot of mistakes, but grew from those mistakes, and
Yeah.
that's why I've dedicated my life to now helping other entrepreneurs, helping these small and medium sized businesses, because I know what it's like to run a business and struggle with working way too much, struggle with not making enough money, struggle with not being able to hold your team accountable. And then I've seen the vice versa of that when your team is completely dialed in, when you are making good money, when you do have that work-life balance. And so that is why I'm committed now to helping other owners and entrepreneurs do just that, because many times, as you know, Zach, when business owners start businesses, they start businesses to have that freedom, to have that quality of life and that work balance financially, from a time standpoint, so that they can leave on a Tuesday at 2 p.m. and go watch their daughter's dance recital. But
Hmm.
what happens is these businesses end up running the entrepreneur,
Yeah.
and that freedom that they set out to achieve ends up actually going the other way, where instead of at a corporate job where you check out at 5 p.m. and you turn it off, where in the small business world where you are responsible for making payroll, where you're
Yeah.
responsible for growing revenue and growing the business, it's hard to turn that off.
Yeah.
So
Well, man, and that's why, like, I really respect what you're doing and stuff too, because it's like, a lot of people don't, they, I was lucky enough, I found a mentor early on who's really helped us get to this point. But a lot of people don't have that network yet, or maybe the skill set to find a mentor. And then you have people like you come in and it's like, hey, man, I got a system that
mhm.
like this works. Like if you just follow the system and I'm going to coach you through it and stuff. Because man, there's no like, like I said, my parents just bought a business and I try to help them a little bit, here and there, but it's their business. So I don't try to be overbearing, but I want to see them succeed. And, my advice is always like, man, go find a mentor. And if you can't, like, find a business coach that can help you, because you can read all the books, you can have an MBA, you can uh, have all the tools for your business to succeed, but no business is ever going to be the same. And what works for me
Mhm.
may not work for somebody else. And
Mhm.
there's not just a like one game plan to do it. And man,
Mhm.
having experts kind of help you along is saves you so much time, money, and headache.
Hmm. Yeah, that was the biggest mistake that I made when I started Podium, the football business 10 years
Yeah.
ago, was I didn't have a mentor that had been in the recruiting the sports recruiting space that could help me navigate the waters, right? So
Yeah.
I was making things up as I went along, hoping that they would work, and that cost me years in terms
Mhm.
of success, in terms of money. And so I couldn't agree with you more in regards to having a mentor that has been there, that has done it, that has found success will save you so much time, heartache, money. It's just a no-brainer in
Yeah.
regards to finding a mentor that can help guide you through the
Yeah.
process.
I agree, dude.
So awesome. Well, shifting, I want to talk about your international travels and you living internationally. And I want to start by talking about the story of how we met. If you're good with that. Um,
Yeah.
Zach and I were both living in Mexico City. Zach's from Alabama. I'm from Sioux Falls, South Dakota. Had no idea who we were. I was working at a coffee shop, and Zach is sitting next to me, and he is meeting with this gorgeous woman. And you're in Mexico City. You're not hearing a Southern American accent ever. And I'm like, who is this stud next to me talking with this stunning supermodel girl?
Yeah.
And so she goes to the bathroom, and I'm like, dude, you're American. What's going
Yeah.
on?
Yeah.
And the rest is history. We became great friends after that. And
Mhm.
so, Zach, talk about your experience living internationally. Why did you want to live internationally even to start?
Man, just kind of like what you said though. Like I'm from a small town in Alabama, and I don't come from a family that's done a lot of traveling. I didn't, grow up going to the south of France, in the summers, and spending the winters, skiing in Norway, or my parents taking me like on an African safari, and then us, climbing, you know, somewhere in the Himalayas. Like that's not the lifestyle I grew up living. It was, if you were lucky enough, you got to go to the beach, in like Florida, or maybe like
Mm-hmm.
up in like, like in Eastern Tennessee. But that's just how I grew up. And I just felt like there was, even in the military, I didn't get a chance to travel like I really wanted to. I mean, I got a chance to go to Afghanistan and, Kuwait and Qatar a little bit, but um, it wasn't the type of traveling that I feel like was going to enrich me as a person. And, it was one of those things too. I just had the opportunity. Like I knew after reading the 4 Hour Work Week that man, I'll tell you, I read that book cover to cover in 3 days. I was just
Wow.
obsessed, and I was like, this is the life I want. And I quit my full-time job 2 weeks. Oh, actually, I scheduled my trip, took all my vacation, and I just went. And, even my boss is like, because this is right after I didn't get that promotion. And he was like, man, you can't take all your vacation at once. I was like, why? And he's like, well, just, you keep your phone on. I was like, okay. But I quit 2 weeks after I got back from that trip. I said,
Mm.
I met all these other people that were already living the life. And so, man, I just really wanted to go experience it and see what the world was about. I don't have many regrets in life. The only regret I have is not doing it sooner, because I've mainly got to see the Americas. I've seen I've been about just about every country in Central and South America, but I still haven't got a chance to do Asia and, much of Europe and, Africa. And it's just, there's so much more I want to see. Of course, now I'm going to be doing it with my wife and family, um, but I wish I'd have just done it earlier. But man, just the people I've met like you, I would have never met you had I, just been, I mean, of course I moved out from Alabama a long time ago, but it's just, man, we've had these conversations over the years. The people you get an opportunity to meet, both from like Americans and English speaking countries, but also like super successful people that live in Mexico and Colombia and Argentina and like some of the other places I've lived at, spent significant time. Like you, man, you just get to meet some really cool people, and then just the perspective in life, I think for me is what I've gained so much more. Um, I have much more patience. I have much more understanding. I mean, just like you and I, like we've lived in Mexico, so we have a far greater understanding of like what's happening at the southern border than your average American. Like we've lived in
Mhm.
Mexico, and it's so funny, man, when you talk like the average American when they think about Mexico, if they've been, it's normally, Cancun, Cabo.
Cabo.
They've never been to
Mm-hmm.
Mexico. They've never been to like, real
Mm-hmm.
Mexico. And they're like so afraid to leave the resort because they think that and it's like, you and I know the beautiful part of Mexico. Like we know
Mm-hmm.
how warm the people are, how delicious the food is. It's a great lifestyle there. I mean, hell, we've talked so many times about like what a life will look like living in Mexico City full time. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, man, that's just like, for me, it's just, I can't imagine, had I never left, what all I'd have missed out on. I tell young
Mm-hmm.
people all the time now when I meet these, especially a lot of these young guys I play golf with and stuff. I'm like, hey, when you graduate high school or college, like, what's your plans? And they're like, well, I want to go to, corporate job. I'm gonna go to, because I live in Oregon now, so like, I want to move to Portland and get it. I'm like, dude, why don't you just go travel for a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
And they're like, well, where? And I'm like, wherever you want. Because, man, I remember being in Argentina, like down in Patagonia, and I would meet like a 18-year-old like German guy and a 19-year-old French girl like working at a hostel. Like, I'm like, how did you get here? And they're like, well, I wanted to travel, and I just went. I'm like, well, what'd you do for money? And they're like, well, I had enough to get here, and then I just worked. I got a
Figured it
job
out.
working in a hostel, and I hitchhiked all the way from Buenos Aires to Patagonia, and it's like, just get out there and live, man. Like, do all those things while you're young, because, man, it's harder when you get older. Just pick up and leave.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think Europe in particular, as a culture, does a great job of promoting travel, right? Like we
Hmm.
have 49 states in the continental US, 48 states in the continental US.
Yeah,
And so it's easy for us to travel across borders and do that.
yeah,
Whereas in Europe, you travel across the border, it's a whole different culture, a whole different country, a whole new language, different ways of living. And so that's kind of just embedded in society over there of, no, go travel, go see these other cultures. And similarly to you, like that's my number one advice to young people is go out and see the world.
hmm,
I learned way more traveling Europe and traveling across the world than I ever did in 4 years of studying finance in college.
yeah,
Like the life skills that you learn, the cultures, the experiences, the people, to your point, like that is the magic of life when you're getting out and seeing what this world truly has to offer. And it allows you to adopt what really matters to you.
hmm,
How do you really want to live your life?
yep,
Because for me, from Sioux Falls, South Dakota, I'd been here pretty much my whole life. I knew this one way of living. I knew how people acted. I know this is how I was supposed to act. And then I also started to develop this reputation and this ego of how people have known me. When
yeah,
you go and move internationally, that ego goes out the door. People don't know you of being this successful
right,
athlete
yeah,
anymore or being this person. So it allows you to recreate yourself and really, again, find who you are. Who do you want to be?
because I think
And then going and being that person.
you and I were kind of the same. Like, when you went to Mexico City, you didn't know anybody, right? You just
Mm,
went,
no.
right?
Yes.
And you had to find your crew. And you had like, you introduced me to a lot of guys that you had met, like Stu and
Hmm.
uh,
Dan.
Dan. And I mean, we had like our own little crew. And then, of course, I had my big crew of Venezuelan guys that I hung out with.
Hmm.
And yeah, I mean, it was, like you said, man, you got to kind of like, people who know you. I mean, you travel in the U.S., but like, there's still like, social media, and people can still kind of figure out who you are. But man, when you go drop off in Mexico City and you don't know a soul, I mean, all the stuff you did in college, and like, nobody knows about the awesome wide receiver who was spiking touchdowns on people, and you're just another dude. And man,
Mm.
I tell you, I you've got such an advantage because you got the look that, man, you could be from anywhere, man. I remember people
Hmm.
always thought you were Brazilian.
Yes. Everyone
Yeah,
thought I was Brazilian in
yeah,
Mexico.
yeah. And so you got that nice mocha skin color, so you can kind of blend in. Like, is this dude Mexican? Is he Brazilian? Where's he from? Versus me, they're just like, that dude's either from U.S. or England. That's about all I can pull off. You know?
Yeah, and with that, yes, it was an amazing time, but obviously there was trials and tribulations at the same time. Like when I moved to Mexico City, I was borderline depressed the first
Mm-hmm.
couple months. I got sick a couple times with Montezuma's revenge. I lost a bunch of weight and I had no
Yeah.
friends. I'm like, and really started to second guess my decision to move down there. I'm like, man, I don't know if this is it.
Yeah.
But then actually I reread The Alchemist for like the 10th time. And
Mm-hmm.
that book kept me in Mexico, helping me to keep the perspective of, no, Will, you are on your personal legend. You're going through this adversity for a reason. And if you stick it through, everything that you've wanted is coming.
Yeah.
And that absolutely happened because after 2 months, I met Dan, who owns the Pinche Gringo, that massive barbecue chain,
Yeah.
and he
Yeah.
introduced me to 30 people. I met Chew at a coffee shop. I met
Yeah.
Stu. And then my whole world, I had this community, and then it became, some of the best years of my life. And so
Yeah.
traveling isn't easy, but once you overcome the initial shock and some of the initial adversity, it will pay dividends for the rest of your life.
100%.
So awesome, man. Segueing, what are the long-term goals for DRI, and how do you manage a multi-million-dollar business with partners in different countries while operating remotely?
Man, it's funny because I'm someone who I try to, like, I do have goals, and I do establish goals because I'm a big, I like giving myself a big, hairy, audacious goal to go after in my personal life, and I do that a lot. And that's one thing we do. We set goals in our business every year on things we're trying to accomplish. We do normally just do two because I think if you try to go too crazy, like you need just two great goals. So really the long-term goal for us is to continue to, I mean, we do want to increase revenue because that's important. You have to, if you don't increase revenue, you don't have a long-term business. And we really want to see how our model scales as we grow because we're, mega frugal. We don't spend money on unnecessary, and I think we have a great model. I do. It's taken some time, but the core principle of our model really hasn't changed. It's we've adapted them, but the core model is still together. And I really want to see how it would do if we're doing 20-40 million a year, because I think that we can. Ultimately, I think we can attract, the best and the brightest to come work with us. I think that we can, continue to do well in underserved markets. And I really want to see, what that looks like. Because for me personally, I mean, hell, when we were in Mexico City, man, I was struggling to pay rent. Like
You and me
you and I
both,
both
brother.
were. You're like, dude, I want to live in Condesa, but it's double the cost. So I'm gonna live in, is it Valle?
I was in Escandon.
It's
Mm-hmm.
Escandon, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, hey man, it's a little bit cheaper over here, so I'm just gonna bike 10 minutes into Condesa. So we were living a lifestyle, man. And what I learned over those years is like, even when I met my now wife, like her and I lived in a travel trailer together for over a year. It's just what I learned was like money's nice, but that's not what my true passion is. So, the money I do make, I invest. But I really, pay my employees well. And that's really what, the long-term goal for me is to have a company that services the federal government, and we provide an excellent work opportunity for, a growing number of people. And to me, that's true success is when you have, I've interviewed and hired guys who are really talented and they just never felt like they got at the right company, and to see them really happy and achieve things in life, provide for their family. I tell people all the time, like, if you, especially doing work with the Department of Veterans Affairs, I mean, it is a pain in the butt a lot of times, but you have the opportunity to take your kids from going to public school to private school if you want. Maybe, instead of being able to take your wife out to dinner on your anniversary, you can fly her to Paris. I want to provide those economic opportunities, but really at the end of the day is we've got to, in order for us to have that long-term goal, is you have to provide a great service to the federal government. And that's really what we, That's really what we go after.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, and you know, you're grinding away, you're growing this business, you've got an awesome BHAG of where you guys are going over the long term. How do you stay fit and healthy and in shape while managing this large enterprise?
Man, it's funny you say that. Yesterday I went to the men's health doctor and got on the scale, and I looked at it and I was like, let me step back on there. I think there's something wrong with your scale. And it popped up to 218. I was like, damn, that pregnancy weight was real. We got the baby like 2.5 months ago. And I feel like I'm still in good shape. I'll tell you, man, the difference I guess since I've approached 40 is that in my mind, I know, like, what's that? He's one of these like sales influencer guys. I hate him. I hope he sees this. He's bald too, but he's like, if you don't have a 6-pack, you don't work for me.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I don't know his
You know
name,
what
but I
I'm
know who
talking
you're
about?
talking about.
Yeah, I hope he
Mm-hmm.
sees it. But to me, it's health isn't if you got a 6-pack. Health is, do you do like if you actually read the studies, like the exercise that does the most for longevity, you'll never in a million years guess what it is. Well, actually, you may know what it is. You stay pretty into the industry, but what
What is
activity
it?
you do will
Walking.
create. What's that?
Walking?
Gardening.
No way.
Yeah, because it's low stress. You're making something grow. You're cultivating. Gardening has proved, like, if you look at like the blue zones around the
Mm-hmm.
world, people the longest life, gardening is in every blue zone.
Wow.
Um, but again, it's not, you being now everybody's got their own goals. I want to be fit, but for me, I've kind of put my fitness to go in a line with what I'm trying to achieve in life. And so, like, next year, my big hair audacious goal is to qualify for the US Open. Am I
Wow.
going to do it? No, but I want to get, so you got to be a .2 handicap in order to get to even try out for the US Open. And I'm close, but for me, if I want to be a .2 handicap or better, and I want to achieve that golf, like I can't go and power lift at the gym 5 days a week and stuff,
Mm.
because you have to build a different body.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like as we get older, my advice to people is set some kind of goal, whether it be run a marathon or a half marathon, or do something that's very challenging that you have to use your body to do, or maybe you be the best pickleball player, you win the pickleball championship, like whatever you do, if you do that, you're going to naturally make yourself move. And
Mm-hmm.
um, for me, that's the biggest way to get, because, man, it's just hard. Like, if your goal is just like, I want to stay hot, you know, especially after you get married and stuff like that. Like, is that, I mean, you obviously want to be attracted to your partner, but it's not a goal. It's going to be hard to stick to a routine. Right. So,
Mm-hmm.
that's mine. I mean, you got to take time to do it. I mean, you and I both know you can work 80, 100 hours a week if you want to, but
Mm-hmm.
you got to take some time to go do other things. And I feel like that's part of it, is just set some goals to do some cool stuff, go climb a mountain.
Yeah, well, you're right. Everyone's fitness journey, health journey is different. And what looks good to me may not look good to you or may not fit your schedule. I don't have kids, so it's a lot easier for me to go to the gym for 2 hours and bust it out, or for me to wake up in the morning and go for a bike ride, than for you now with a new baby girl. I can only, bless you,
Thanks.
for you now with a baby girl who, it's affecting your sleep, you've got more responsibilities. So yeah, I mean, I love that you are cultivating that mentality of, I need to do what's right for me. Qualifying for the US Open is freaking epic, and I hope you do it so I can come watch.
That'd be cool.
Um, and I also don't want to golf with you because I'm about a 15 handicap right now, so I got a ways to go. But
Yeah.
yeah, dude, I'm
I
stoked to
just want
hear.
revenge on your brother, man. He beat me like a redheaded stepchild named Billy the last time I was in Sioux Falls. He was playing about a scratch then, and I've gotten down to that number. So I got to get some revenge on Sean.
Well, let's get that set up, man. We got to get that
Yeah,
set
that'd
up
be
in the
fun.
next year. I think
That'd be
him and
fun.
his wife are in Pebble Beach right now for his 40th
Oh,
birthday.
really?
Yeah, yeah. So, pretty
Happy
cool
for him.
stuff.
Happy for him. He's a
So,
good guy.
yeah, he really is. So, all right. The name of the podcast is Willpower. Zach, what does the term willpower mean to you?
Man, I really think it's like your commitment to discipline, right? It's do you have the willpower to get up in the morning and stay committed to your goals, to the things you have in your life, your family? Because I think a lot of people dream about a lifestyle they want, but they don't have the willpower to do it. And sometimes willpower, some of us are born with it, but I've had times in my life, and you're talking about when you first moved to Mexico City, and um, yeah, I'm sure after you got done playing NFL Europe, like there's some times like we all go through phases where we're not super motivated, and
Hmm.
you have to have the willpower to get your ass up and get to work, because at the end of the day, like, man, work ethic, it will outpace talent every time,
Mm,
outside of certain opportunities. And really just knowing that the harder I work and the more disciplined I am to commit to the small little things to accomplish my overall goals is that's the recipe of life to me. Says, because like we always talk about these dopamine hits you get from your phone, but
hmm
that's such a short pleasure versus you accomplishing something like you go climb Mount Everest. Like 98% of it sucks, maybe 99% of it sucks. Like 1% is good, like you get good views and stuff, but you're cold, it's you're hot, you're in the sun, it just, but it's when you accomplish one of these big goals, the the happiness you have after lasts your lifetime. And
mm,
I really think willpower is just, again, something that you have to have, and it's something that you're not like, again, most people aren't born with it. Like, you have to. It's an internal get off my ass and get moving that you have to have in order to succeed in life. It depends on your level of success.
mm. Absolutely. That was so well said because you're right. People, it's not hard for people to dream and to have these lofty visions. But what is hard is when you make the blueprint of how to get there,
Hmm.
when you don't have a great night of sleep, when you're sick, when you're just tired, when you've got other things going on. It's hard to follow through on that plan to achieve the vision. And that's where that willpower comes in.
Hmm.
And Gary, what is his name? The doctor who's not Gary Brecka. Um, I forget his name. Huberman. Uh,
Hmm.
Huberman. He's talking about how in science they're starting to find out that there is a part of your brain that is actually can be strengthened, and the more that you do hard things, the more
Hmm.
that muscle grows. And so it's something that can be cultivated, it can be developed. But again, you're at point A, you want to get to point B. What's going to get you there? The willpower to follow through on those plans when things get hard. And that's what separates the people who reach that success and those people who never really amount to much or maybe don't achieve that much because they don't have the courage and the strength to see those things through. And so
Yeah.
I love what you said about
Well, it's funny,
willpower.
man. My wife, Louisa, she fucked around. Now she's about to find out. She told me last week she wants to run a marathon. She wanted her goal this year was run a marathon. So I signed her ass up. Unfortunately, I signed myself up too. I've ran one. This will be number two, but I want to support her on her goal, and uh, showed her the email last night. I was like, oh, by the way, you're running a marathon. So it's she's gonna do it. But she fucked around. Now she's about to find out. Tell me you want
After
to
just
run a
giving birth a month or two ago.
marathon. Yeah, don't tell me you want to run a marathon.
Don't tell Zach. He's going to sign your ass up.
Yep.
Well, I have aspirations to do a triathlon next year. So
Damn.
if you want in on that, let's talk after this.
Yeah. I may. I'll tell you what. If I didn't have my U.S. Open, because I got to spend a lot of time on the golf course, a lot of time practicing,
Hmm.
but maybe the year after next.
All right, unless if you're on the tour by then.
I'll tell you that's not going to happen. I don't have a snowball's chance in hell to get the Open, but I've always wanted to at least try out for it. And I've never been good enough because you got to be a .2 handicap to get there.
Hmm.
So I ain't getting any younger, and I've got about 5 years left of prime golf age before it really starts going downhill. So got to do it now or never.
Now or never, buddy. Well, as we start to wrap this up, Zach, what is one of your favorite quotes or mottos that you live by?
Man, I remember reading this. I think it was when I was in high school, and I kind of really underachieved in high school. I was a straight A student up until 8th grade, and then I just fell off. I mean, I had a lot of things happen in my childhood and stuff that um, I let get to me, and I wasn't the student or um, the person that I really could have been. And I remember reading this quote, and it was right after I decided to go to senior skip day instead of going to an algebra test, and I ended up flunking algebra 2 my senior year, and I didn't walk because of it, and I had to go to
Mm,
summer school.
mm,
And I remember reading a quote while I was in summer school, and it said, I've never been able to find the quote who actually said it. It's basically it's not where you finished, it's where you started from to get there. And it's always stuck with me because I had a tough upbringing, and it was when I was in high school, I used that as a reason why I don't have to be an elite performer, is because I had a crutch, I had a reason not to be. And really, when I joined the Navy, that was even my freshman year of college. Like I did well, but I was still kind of like floating through life. And then I'd go back to that quote, and I would say, okay, you may have been way further down. Like when the race started, you may have been like 100 yards behind everybody else. But let's see where you can finish.
mm,
And maybe had I had a um, better childhood, a little bit more stable parents, maybe I'd be a senator right now. Maybe I'd be a little bit higher up. Maybe I would have, my company would be that further along. Maybe I would have traveled a lot more. The point is that it's we all start somewhere, and you can't necessarily judge somebody on where they're at because you never know where they started from. And
mm,
that's kind of a quote that I've always thought about, because I know a lot of people say it's not where you started, it's where you finish. It's like, well, if a kid grew up in an orphanage and he still, was able to, live a successful life, just, having a good job and a good family, and, raising three children, and stayed out of trouble his whole life. That's a pretty good finish considering where he started from. And I feel like
mm,
there's too many people who see people as not like this ultra successful influencer business because they're not doing these just huge accomplishments. Like, well, man, you don't know like where they started from in the first place. They may be doing
mhm.
really damn good right now, considering the circumstances they had to grow up in or things that happened in their life. So, more about perspective and stuff.
That's so cool, Zach. And that brings me to think about the book, and I've mentioned it on this podcast before, The Gap and the Gain by Dan
Mm-hmm.
Sullivan, where he talks about for people like you and I who are hustlers, who are out there getting after it, we sometimes get ourselves in the gap, which means that we're measuring our performance against where we want to go.
Yep.
And two things happen when we do that. One, we have this future or this job or this amount of money or this life circumstance that we want to achieve, and we're not happy or we feel unfulfilled until we achieve that place. The second thing is when we do achieve that goal, it's a moving target. We achieve
Yep.
it. We made $1 million. Oh, well, that's not enough. We want to make 5 million. And then,
Yep.
so again, we're right back in that gap because we're moving the target. Whereas if you're in the gain, you're measuring backwards. So what did I do 1
Mm,
month ago? What did I do 3 years ago? What did I do 10 years ago? And you're like,
yeah.
holy shit, I have come a long ways over this
Yeah.
time period. And it just helps you to keep things in perspective of no, I am doing the right things. No, I have come so far, so that you don't find yourself in that gap comparing yourselves to other people as to where you think you should be.
Man, I think that's so important too, man. It's so cool you say that, because I try to tell people all the time, like, they'll ask me, 5 years, 10 years. And I do think it's important to have those goals, but it's just like, man, I try to really just wake up and do well win that day. And that way you can go back and look at those, maybe even a year ago, like, man, I've really done a lot. I mean, I've accomplished a lot last 2 years, just since I've, you committed to Louisa and got married. And I mean, it was funny because when I first showed up here to Oregon 2 years ago, I was in a 20-foot travel trailer. That's all the stuff I owned, which is what I wanted, but that in 2 years, I, bought a house right next to the country club, joined the country club, just bought a 1,300-acre ranch. It's not about the stuff. It's about, I've committed and worked hard and, providing for my family now. And it's, but I think if you, it's important to have those goals, but if you spend your whole life thinking that your life is going to be better when you have those things, you miss out on enjoying the present. And the things that you just talked about is, you spend your time in the gap and not in the present, and enjoy the success you have made. I mean, right now I'm getting to sit on my back porch, looking at the mountains, talking to my boy, a great friend of mine who's got to start a podcast. And, for me, it's like, it's a great day. I want to enjoy it. I don't need to worry about, if once we get to 40 million in revenue, how much better my life's going to be. Cause it may not be better. Hell, it may be dead by then, it's really just enjoying your present and, win the day, man.
Win the day. Yeah. Couldn't be a better day for me either, Zach, for us to be on this podcast and be able to catch up and reminisce. So thank you so much for being on, brother. Where can people find more about you, find more about DRI?
Well, man, I've kind of taken a backseat on social media. Most of the reasons that, I used to use Instagram and Facebook so much was to meet girls back in my single days. So I've refocused my efforts, and being off social media. But I still am on X a little bit more actively now, kind of more stand up with world events. But it's just Zach and then Blenkinsopp. And I'm the only one on the planet, so it's pretty easy to find me. But I do post on there a little bit more than I do on Facebook or Instagram. But if you have any construction guys, I mean, I just include my email address, and I'm always open to answer questions. Because again, I had a mentor help me get here, and I try to help where I can. Other people's got maybe questions about things.
Awesome, dude. Thanks so much, Zach. Appreciate you, bro.
Appreciate you, man. Thanks for having me on.